Picture this. It is September 25th, 1396, and you are a French knight standing in the cramped streets of Nicopolis. Your armor weighs 60 pounds, but it feels like nothing compared to the weight of what you are about to face. The sun is already climbing, turning your steel shell into an oven. Around you, 25,000 crusaders are preparing for what they believe will be an easy victory. The Turkish camp lies just beyond the walls, and your commanders have assured you that these Muslims will scatter like sheep at the first charge of Christian knights. But you notice something that makes your stomach turn. Your scouts are returning with troubling news. The Ottoman force is larger than expected, far larger. Your commanders dismiss the reports with a wave of their gauntlet hands. They have been waiting for this moment for months. They are not going to let peasant soldiers ruin their chance at glory. You check your horse one more time. The destrier beneath you costs more than a farm. It has been bred for one purpose, to carry you and your armor into the enemy at full gallop and crush anyone unfortunate enough to be standing in the way. Around you, the flower of French chivalry is mounting up. These are the finest warriors in Christendom. They have never lost a major engagement. They believe they are invincible. What you do not know, what none of you know, is that you are about to charge into the most devastating defeat in crusading history. By sunset, 20,000 of your brothers will be dead or captured. The lucky ones will die quickly on the field. The unlucky ones will watch as the Sultan orders the execution of thousands of prisoners in cold blood. This is not just a battle. This is the beginning of the end of medieval warfare as you know it. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you are listening from. I find it incredible that we are exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. To understand how 25,000 crusaders walked into a slaughter, you have to go back 6 years to when the nightmare began. The year is 1390, and Europe is terrified. News has just arrived from the Balkans that sends shockwaves through every Christian court from London to Rome. The Ottoman Empire has won a crushing victory at the Battle of Kosovo. The Serbian kingdom, the last major Christian power in the Balkans, has been shattered. The road to Hungary is now wide open. This is not just another border skirmish. This is existential terror. The Ottomans are not raiders looking for plunder. They are builders of empire. Every territory they conquer stays conquered. They do not just defeat armies, they replace entire civilizations. Cities that have been Christian for 1,000 years are being converted into Islamic strongholds. Churches are becoming mosques. The local nobility is being systematically eliminated or absorbed into the Ottoman system. King Sigismund of Hungary looks at his maps and realizes he is next. His kingdom sits on the northern edge of the Ottoman advance like a speed bump in front of a steamroller. He cannot stop them alone. Hungary is a powerful kingdom, but it is not powerful enough to face the full might of the Ottoman war machine. Sigismund needs allies. He needs them desperately. So he does what medieval kings do when they need help fighting Muslims. He calls for a crusade. The call goes out across Christendom in 1395. This is not like the Crusades of old, where the goal was to recapture Jerusalem. This crusade has a much simpler objective: stop the Ottomans from conquering Europe. The message is clear. If the Ottomans are not stopped at Hungary, they will be at Vienna. If they take Vienna, they will be at the Rhine. If they cross the Rhine, all of Christendom falls. The response is overwhelming. This is what historians call the Crusade of Nicopolis, but it should really be called the last hurrah of chivalry. Knights from all over Western Europe answer the call. These are not desperate peasants looking for salvation. These are the elite. These are the sons of the greatest families in France, Burgundy, Germany, and England. They see this crusade as a chance to win glory, to prove their worth, and to do what their ancestors did: kill infidels for Christ. Leading the French contingent is Jean de Nevers, the son of the Duke of Burgundy. He is young, wealthy, and hungry for fame. He commands 10,000 French knights and men-at-arms. These are the cream of French nobility. They wear the finest armor money can buy. Their horses are war horses bred over generations for size and aggression. They carry lances that can punch through plate metal. They have never been defeated in their lives. Alongside the French are the Burgundians, the Germans, the English, the Wallachians, and a contingent of Knights Hospitaller. The army that gathers is a who's who of European military power. Estimates vary, but most historians agree that the Crusader force numbers somewhere between 20,000 and 25,000 men. It is the largest crusading army assembled in nearly 200 years. But there is a problem. Actually, there are several problems, and they are all related to ego. The French knights believe they are the finest warriors on earth. They believe that the mere sight of their banners will cause the Ottomans to flee. They believe that this campaign will be a repeat of the First Crusade, where Christian knights carved through Muslim armies like a hot knife through butter. They have not fought the Ottomans before. They do not understand what they are walking into. King Sigismund of Hungary, the man who called this crusade, does understand. He has been fighting the Ottomans for years. He knows their tactics. He knows their discipline. He knows that they do not fight like the Muslims of 200 years ago. The Ottoman army is not a mob of lightly armored cavalry. It is a professional, well-trained, and terrifyingly effective military machine. Sigismund tries to warn his French allies. He tells them that the Ottomans are dangerous. He tells them that rushing into battle without proper reconnaissance is suicide. The French laugh at him. They see him as a provincial king from a backwater kingdom. What does he know about real warfare? The French have been fighting the English for 50 years in the 100 Years' War. They have faced English longbowmen and survived. They have learned to charge through arrow storms that blacken the sky. Surely these Turkish archers cannot be worse than the English. This arrogance is the seed of disaster. As the Crusader army marches east through Hungary toward the Ottoman frontier, the internal tensions begin to show. The French knights refuse to take orders from Sigismund. They refuse to scout ahead. They refuse to wait for the slower infantry to catch up. They want to charge ahead, find the enemy, and win glory before anyone else can steal it from them. By early September 1396, the Crusader army reaches the fortress of Nicopolis on the Danube River. Nicopolis is a heavily fortified Ottoman stronghold. It controls the river crossing and guards the road deeper into Ottoman territory. The Crusaders lay siege to it. This is where the real problems begin. Medieval sieges are slow, grinding affairs. You surround the fortress, cut off supplies, and wait for the defenders to starve. It takes weeks, sometimes months. The French knights are not interested in waiting. They want action. They want a battle. So, when word arrives that Sultan Bayezid is marching north with a relief army, the French are ecstatic. Finally, a real fight. Finally, a chance to prove their worth. The news spreads through the camp like wildfire. The Sultan himself is coming. This is not just a battle anymore. This is a chance to capture or kill the leader of the Ottoman Empire. This is a chance to end the threat in a single afternoon. The French knights begin to prepare. They sharpen their swords. They polish their armor. They pray to God for victory. They have no idea that they are praying for a miracle they will not receive. Sultan Bayezid is not some provincial warlord. He is one of the most brilliant military minds of his generation. His nickname is Yildirim, which means thunderbolt. He earned that name by moving his armies faster than anyone thought possible. He has crushed rebellions, conquered kingdoms, and never lost a major battle. When he hears that a massive Crusader army is besieging Nicopolis, he does not panic. He smiles. Bayezid knows exactly what he is dealing with. He has studied the Franks, as the Ottomans call all Western Europeans. He knows their strengths and their weaknesses. He knows they are brave to the point of recklessness. He knows they believe in the power of the cavalry charge above all else. He knows they have contempt for infantry and archers. He knows they will charge without thinking, and he knows exactly how to kill them. The Sultan assembles his army with terrifying speed. Within days, he has gathered a force estimated at anywhere from 60,000 to over 100,000 men. The exact numbers are debated by historians, but what is not debated is the composition of the army. This is not a horde of undisciplined raiders. This is a combined arms force designed to destroy cavalry. At the core of the Ottoman army are the janissaries. These are not ordinary soldiers. They are slave soldiers, taken as boys from Christian families in the Balkans, converted to Islam, and trained from childhood to be warriors. They know no other life. They have no families, no property, and no loyalty except to the Sultan. They are the most disciplined infantry in the world. They fight in tight formations with pikes, swords, and an increasing number of early firearms. Supporting the janissaries are the Sipahi, the Ottoman heavy cavalry. These are feudal warriors similar to European knights, but with one crucial difference. They follow orders. They do not charge for glory. They charge when commanded and retreat when commanded. They are part of a system, not individual glory seekers. Then there are the light cavalry, the akinci. These are raiders and scouts. Their job is to harass, to skirmish, and to lure the enemy into traps. They wear light armor and carry composite bows that can fire 12 arrows a minute. They are not meant to stand and fight. They are meant to infuriate the enemy into making mistakes. Bayezid's plan is elegant in its simplicity. He will use the light cavalry to bait the Crusaders into a premature charge. He will use stakes and terrain to break their momentum. He will use his infantry to hold them in place, and then he will use his heavy cavalry to crush them from the flanks. It is a plan that requires discipline, timing, and an enemy stupid enough to fall for it. Fortunately for Bayezid, the Crusaders are about to prove themselves exactly that stupid. On the night of September 24th, 1396, the Crusader camp is in chaos. Word has reached them that the Ottoman army is approaching. Sultan Bayezid has arrived with a massive force and is deploying just south of Nicopolis. This is the moment the Crusaders have been waiting for. This is the chance for glory. But there is a problem, a big problem. The Crusader army is divided, not just physically, but ideologically. King Sigismund of Hungary, the man who actually called this crusade, tries to assert command. He calls a council of war. He gathers the French, the Burgundians, the Germans, and his own Hungarian lords. He stands before them and lays out his plan. Sigismund has fought the Ottomans before. He knows their tactics. He explains to the assembled knights that the Ottomans will use their light cavalry to bait them into charging. He explains that behind the light cavalry will be stakes and fortifications designed to break the charge. He explains that behind the stakes will be disciplined infantry ready to cut down any knight who makes it through. He explains that the only way to win is to let the Hungarians and the infantry engage first, tire out the Ottoman forces, and then have the heavy cavalry deliver the killing blow. It is a sensible plan. It is a smart plan. It is the kind of plan that wins battles. The French knights hate it. To them, Sigismund's plan is an insult. He is suggesting that peasant infantry should fight before noble knights. He is suggesting that they should wait in the rear while common soldiers win the glory. This is unacceptable. Jean de Nevers, the young French commander, stands up. He is surrounded by the finest knights in France. Men like Philippe d'Artois, Enguerrand de Coucy, and Jean de Vienne. These are not just warriors. They are lords. They command vast estates. They have spent their entire lives training for war. They look at Sigismund, a king from a small kingdom on the edge of civilization, and they see someone beneath them. De Nevers makes his position clear. The French will lead the charge. The French will strike first. The French will win the glory. This is not up for debate. This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. The other French lords nod in agreement. They have crossed half of Europe for this moment. They are not going to let Hungarian peasants steal their thunder. Sigismund tries to argue. He tries to explain that pride will get them all killed. But the French are not listening. They have already made up their minds. To them, this is not just about tactics. This is about honor. This is about proving that French chivalry is superior to all others. This is about going home with stories that will be sung by minstrels for generations. The meeting breaks up with the plan in tatters. Sigismund returns to his Hungarian troops knowing that disaster is coming. He cannot stop it. The French contingent is too large, too powerful, and too arrogant. They will do what they want, and everyone else will have to deal with the consequences. That night, as the French knights prepare for battle, there is a festive atmosphere in their camp. They are drinking wine. They are boasting about how many Turks they will kill. They are wagering on who will capture the Sultan. They polish their armor until it gleams. They sharpen their lances. They prepare their horses. They are convinced that tomorrow will be the greatest day of their lives. They have no idea that they are spending their last night on earth. As dawn breaks on September 25th, 1396, the two armies face each other across a stretch of open ground south of Nicopolis. The Crusaders are deployed with the French heavy cavalry in the front against all military logic. Behind them are the other contingents, the Burgundians, the Germans, and finally King Sigismund's Hungarians with the Wallachian allies bringing up the rear. The Ottoman deployment is a masterpiece of defensive warfare. At the very front, positioned to be seen clearly by the Crusaders, are the Akinci light cavalry. These are the bait. They are lightly armored horsemen whose job is to look threatening but ultimately run away. Behind them, invisible to the Crusaders, are thousands of wooden stakes driven into the ground at angles designed to impale charging horses. Behind the stakes are the janissaries, formed up in dense blocks, shields locked, weapons ready. They are silent. They are disciplined. They are ready to die where they stand if the Sultan commands it. And behind the janissaries, hidden behind a low ridge, are the Sipahi heavy cavalry, the hammer waiting to fall. Sultan Bayezid sits on his horse on a nearby hill, watching. He can see the crusader formation. He can see the glittering mass of French knights at the front. He knows exactly what is about to happen. He has seen it before. The Franks always charge. They cannot help themselves. It is bred into them. All he has to do is wait. In the crusader lines, the French knights are growing impatient. The sun is climbing. The heat is building. Their armor is beginning to cook them. They can see the Ottoman light cavalry in front of them, taunting them, daring them to charge. The Akinci are riding back and forth, shouting insults, firing arrows that fall harmlessly short. It is psychological warfare at its finest. Jean de Nevers looks at his fellow commanders. They are all thinking the same thing. The enemy is right there. They are within charging distance. Why are they waiting? What are they afraid of? One of the older knights, a veteran of campaigns in France, tries to urge caution. He suggests they wait for the Hungarians to scout the enemy position. De Nevers dismisses him. The time for caution is over. The time for glory is now. The order is given. The French heavy cavalry, 10,000 strong, begins to move forward. At first, it is a trot. The horses are fresh. The knights are eager. As they pick up speed, the ground begins to shake. 10,000 hooves hitting the earth creates a sound like thunder. The lances come down. The knights lean forward in their saddles. This is what they have trained for their entire lives. The Ottoman light cavalry sees them coming and does exactly what they are supposed to do. They turn and run. They flee back toward their own lines, firing arrows over their shoulders as they go. To the French, this looks like fear. This looks like the enemy breaking at the mere sight of their charge. This looks like victory. The French accelerate to a full gallop. They are screaming war cries. They are invoking God and the Virgin Mary. They are certain that they are unstoppable. And then, at full speed, with no way to turn or slow down, they hit the stakes. The first line of French knights crashes into a hidden forest of sharpened wooden poles. Horses scream as stakes punch through their chests and bellies. Knights are thrown from their saddles at full speed, hitting the ground in 60 pounds of armor. The momentum of the charge carries the second line into the first. Horses pile up. Men are crushed beneath their own comrades. The beautiful, perfect cavalry charge disintegrates into a screaming, thrashing pile of metal and flesh. Those knights who somehow make it through the stakes find themselves facing the janissaries. These are not frightened peasants. These are professional soldiers who have been waiting for this moment. They form a wall of shields and spears. The French knights, now on foot because their horses are dead or dying, try to fight their way through. They are swinging swords and axes, cutting down janissaries one by one. But for every Ottoman soldier who falls, another steps forward to take his place. The French are exhausted. They have just run uphill in full armor. They have climbed over stakes and dead horses. They are dehydrated and overheating. The weight of their armor, which seemed like nothing this morning, now feels like an anchor dragging them down. They are fighting in small isolated groups, surrounded by enemies. And the janissaries are using a new weapon that the French have never faced before. Some of the janissaries are armed with early firearms, arquebuses, and hand cannons. These weapons are crude. They are slow to reload. They are wildly inaccurate. But at point-blank range, against a target wearing plate armor, they are devastating. The sound alone is terrifying. The French have never heard anything like it. Each shot sounds like a thunderclap. And when a lead ball hits a breastplate at close range, it punches through. Knights who have survived arrow storms and sword fights are dying to weapons they do not understand. The smell of sulfur fills the air. The smoke from the firearms mixes with the dust and the blood. The battlefield is turning into hell. Back in the Crusader lines, the rest of the army is watching in horror. What was supposed to be a glorious charge has turned into a massacre. The French knights, the finest warriors in Christendom, are being cut down like wheat. King Sigismund turns to his commanders and makes a decision. They have to try to save the French. If they do not, the entire Crusader army will be destroyed. The Hungarians and the other contingents begin to advance, but they are moving uphill toward an enemy that is now fully prepared. The element of surprise is gone. The Ottomans know exactly what is coming. As the Crusader infantry and cavalry move forward, Sultan Bayezid gives the order he has been waiting to give. The Sipahi heavy cavalry, hidden behind the ridge, mount up and move into position. The trap is about to close. As the Hungarian and German forces struggle forward to rescue the trapped French, they have no idea that they are walking into the second phase of Sultan Bayezid's plan. The janissaries have done their job. They have absorbed the French charge. They have broken the momentum of the Crusader army. Now, it is time to destroy them completely. The Sipahi heavy cavalry appears on both flanks simultaneously. These are not the light skirmishers the Crusaders have been fighting. These are fully armored warriors on powerful horses. They are the Ottoman equivalent of knights, except they fight as a cohesive unit instead of individual glory seekers. There are thousands of them, and they hit the Crusader flanks like twin hammers. The Crusaders, already exhausted from fighting their way uphill, suddenly find themselves being attacked from three directions. The Janissaries are in front of them, the Sipahi are on their left and right, and behind them, their own supply train is vulnerable. The battlefield geometry has shifted from an attack to an encirclement. King Sigismund realizes what is happening. He is a veteran commander. He has seen this tactic before. The Ottomans are not trying to push them back. They are trying to surround them. If the Crusaders stay on this field, they will be annihilated to the last man. He gives the order that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He orders a retreat. The Hungarian cavalry, which has barely engaged the enemy, turns and rides away from the battle. Sigismund is trying to save what he can. He is trying to preserve some part of his army, so that Hungary will have defenders when the Ottomans inevitably invade. From a strategic standpoint, it is the right decision. From an honor standpoint, it is unforgivable. The rest of the Crusader army watches their Hungarian allies ride away. The men who are still fighting the Janissaries, the knights who are trapped in the stakes, the infantry who are being cut down by the Sipahi, they all see the Hungarian banners retreating. The psychological impact is devastating. They have been abandoned. They are alone on a field surrounded by enemies. The discipline of the Crusader army collapses. Units that were trying to maintain formation break apart. Men start running. Some try to fight their way back to the camp. Others throw down their weapons and surrender. Others fight to the death where they stand. The battlefield becomes a chaotic swirl of individual combats, small groups of Crusaders surrounded by Ottomans. The French knights, those who are still alive, find themselves completely cut off. They have pushed so far forward that they are now an island in a sea of Ottoman soldiers. Some of them, the younger ones who still have strength, try to fight their way back. They cut through Janissaries, bash aside Sipahi, and run in their heavy armor toward where they think the Crusader lines should be. Most of them do not make it. Others, exhausted and wounded, surrender. In medieval warfare, surrendering to an enemy knight usually meant being taken prisoner for ransom. If you were a nobleman, being captured was humiliating, but not fatal. You would be treated well, negotiations would be made, and eventually your family would pay for your release. The French knights who surrender believe this is what will happen. They throw down their swords, they raise their hands, they call out their names and titles, trying to make it clear that they are valuable prisoners worth keeping alive. The Ottomans accept their surrender and bind their hands. Hundreds of French nobles are taken prisoner. Jean de Nevers, the commander of the French contingent, is among them. So is Philippe d'Artois, the constable of France. So is Enguerrand de Coucy, one of the richest men in Europe. They are stripped of their armor and herded together under guard. They are alive, and for now, that seems like enough. On the rest of the battlefield, the slaughter continues. The Crusader infantry, mostly German and Burgundian foot soldiers, are trying to retreat in good order. They form shield walls and fight their way backwards step by step. But the Ottoman cavalry is faster. They ride circles around the retreating columns, firing arrows into them, cutting down anyone who falls behind. It is not a battle anymore. It is a hunt. By early afternoon, it is over. The Crusader army has been destroyed. Thousands are dead on the field. Thousands more are prisoners. The few who escaped, mostly Sigismund's Hungarians and some Wallachian cavalry, are fleeing north as fast as their horses can carry them. The camp at Nicopolis, filled with supplies and treasure, has been overrun. The Ottomans are looting it methodically. Sultan Bayezid tours the battlefield on horseback. He looks at the piles of dead Crusaders. He looks at the broken siege equipment. He looks at the banners of France and Burgundy trampled into the mud. This is the largest Crusader army assembled in 200 years, and he has annihilated it in a single afternoon. It is a complete victory. But as the sun begins to set, Bayezid faces a problem. He has won the battle, but now he has thousands of prisoners. Feeding and guarding them will strain his supply lines. Ransoming them will take months, maybe years, and keeping them alive risks them being rescued or escaping. Among his advisors, a debate begins. What should be done with the prisoners? Some argue for ransom. The French prisoners are worth a fortune. Jean de Nevers alone could fetch a ransom that would fund an entire campaign. Philippe d'Artois is the constable of France. His family would pay anything to get him back. From a purely financial standpoint, these prisoners are a windfall. Others argue for execution. The Crusaders came to destroy the Ottoman Empire. They came to kill Muslims and take their land. They deserve no mercy. Furthermore, keeping thousands of armed warriors alive, even as prisoners, is dangerous. If there is a rescue attempt or an uprising, these men will fight. The safest course is to kill them all. Bayezid listens to both arguments. He is not a man driven by emotion. He is calculating. He makes his decision based on a mixture of pragmatism and message sending. He will keep the most valuable prisoners for ransom. Men like Jean de Nevers and the other high-ranking nobles will be spared. They are worth too much to kill. But the rest, the knights and soldiers of lower rank, they will die. The order goes out. The next morning, the executions will begin. The morning of September 26, 1396, dawns clear and cold. The prisoners, bound and under heavy guard, are marched out in groups. They have spent the night wondering what will happen to them. Some still believe they will be ransomed. Others have heard rumors and are terrified. When they see the Ottoman soldiers forming up with swords drawn, the truth becomes unavoidable. The executions are systematic. The prisoners are brought forward in groups of 10 or 20. They are forced to kneel. Ottoman soldiers move down the line, beheading each man in turn. There is no ceremony. There is no trial. There is only the dull, wet sound of blades cutting through flesh and bone. This is industrial killing. The French nobles who have been kept separate are forced to watch. Jean de Nevers, Philippe d'Artois, and the other ransomable prisoners are made to stand and witness the execution of their own men. This is psychological warfare. Sultan Bayezid wants them to understand the price of their arrogance. He wants them to carry this memory back to France. He wants all of Europe to know what happens when you challenge the Ottoman Empire. Contemporary sources, both Christian and Muslim, record the horror of this scene. The Burgundian chronicler Jean Froissart, who interviewed survivors, writes that the executions went on for hours. The ground became so soaked with blood that it turned into mud. The smell was overwhelming. Some of the prisoners begged for mercy. Others prayed. Others cursed their executioners. It made no difference. Estimates of how many were executed vary wildly. Some sources claim 3,000. Others claim 10,000. Modern historians tend to settle on a figure between 3,000 and 5,000 prisoners killed. When you combine that with the number killed in the actual battle, the crusader casualties are staggering. Of the 25,000 men who marched to Nicopolis, fewer than 5,000 ever made it home. Sultan Bayezid justified the executions with a simple calculation. These men were captured bearing arms against the Sultan. Under the laws of war as practiced in the Ottoman Empire, that made them rebels, not honorable enemies. Rebels do not get ransomed. Rebels get executed. It was brutal, but from the Ottoman perspective, it was legal. For the survivors, the trauma was permanent. Jean de Nevers was eventually ransomed for the staggering sum of 200,000 gold ducats. His father, the Duke of Burgundy, had to sell estates and raise taxes across his duchy to pay it. De Nevers returned to France in 1398, a broken man. He had left as a glory-seeking youth. He returned as a cautious, haunted survivor. He never spoke publicly about what he saw at Nicopolis. Philippe d'Artois was also ransomed, though his health never recovered. He died within a few years, some say from the physical and psychological wounds of the campaign. The few knights who made it home alive brought with them stories that shocked Europe. This was not how crusades were supposed to end. Crusades were supposed to be glorious. They were supposed to be victories of faith over paganism. Nicopolis was a massacre. The news of the disaster spread across Europe like a plague. In Paris, the royal court received word of the defeat and went into mourning. King Charles VI of France, already struggling with bouts of madness, reportedly wept when he heard that the flower of French chivalry had been cut down. In Burgundy, the Duke nearly bankrupted himself paying the ransoms. In Germany, families who had sent their sons on crusade received letters informing them that those sons would never return. The political consequences were immediate. King Sigismund of Hungary, who had tried to prevent the disaster, was blamed for the defeat. The French accused him of cowardice for retreating. The fact that his retreat probably saved his kingdom from total destruction was ignored. Sigismund would spend the next decade rebuilding his army and reinforcing his borders, knowing that the Ottomans would come again. For the Ottoman Empire, Nicopolis was a declaration of dominance. Sultan Bayezid sent messengers to every corner of the Islamic world announcing the victory. He sent the captured crusader banners to Cairo, to Baghdad, to Damascus, displaying them as trophies. The message was clear. The Ottomans were not just another regional power. They were the new superpower. They had faced the best that Christian Europe could throw at them and annihilated it. The Battle of Nicopolis marked a turning point in the balance of power between East and West. Before Nicopolis, the Crusades were seen as viable military campaigns. After Nicopolis, that illusion was shattered. There would be other crusades, other attempts to push back the Ottoman tide, but none would ever again command the confidence and resources of Nicopolis. The age of the Crusades was effectively over. But there is a bitter irony to Sultan Bayezid's victory. Just 6 years later, in 1402, Bayezid would face his own catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Ankara. He would be crushed by another conqueror, Tamerlane, the Mongol warlord. Bayezid would be captured, humiliated, and would die in captivity. The man who executed thousands of crusaders would himself die as a prisoner. History has a way of balancing its scales. For the French knights who died at Nicopolis, there would be no such poetic justice. They died because they were arrogant. They died because they refused to listen to wiser counsel. They died because they believed that courage and noble blood were enough to overcome superior tactics and discipline. The battlefield does not care about your lineage. It does not care about your honor. It only cares about who makes better decisions. The survivors of Nicopolis brought back lessons that would reshape European warfare. They learned that infantry and firearms could stop heavy cavalry. They learned that combined arms tactics were superior to glorious but suicidal charges. They learned that wars are won by generals who think, not by knights who boast. These lessons would be applied in the coming centuries as Europe slowly, painfully, adapted to the realities of gunpowder warfare. But in the moment, in the immediate aftermath of the battle, all that mattered was the silence. The silence of 20,000 men who would never speak again. The silence of families who would never see their sons return. The silence of a dream that died on a field in Bulgaria. The dream that Christian knights, simply by virtue of their faith and their courage, could defeat any enemy. Nicopolis proved that dream was a lie. To understand why Nicopolis hit European consciousness so hard, you have to understand what it represented. This was not just a military defeat. This was a psychological earthquake that shattered assumptions Europeans had held for centuries. For 300 years, since the First Crusade, Western Europeans had believed in a specific narrative about themselves and their place in the world. That narrative went something like this. Christians were inherently superior to Muslims. Their faith made them stronger. Their knightly culture made them braver. Yes, individual battles might be lost, but ultimately, righteousness would prevail. Jerusalem had been captured. The Holy Land had been held, then lost, then partially recaptured. There had been setbacks, but the trajectory was clear. Christianity would triumph because God was on their side. Nicopolis destroyed that narrative in a single afternoon. 25,000 of the finest Christian warriors had marched confidently into battle, expecting an easy victory. They had been slaughtered. The Sultan had not just defeated them. He had executed thousands of prisoners in cold blood, treating them not as worthy opponents, but as criminals. The psychological impact was devastating. In the churches and courts of Europe, people asked uncomfortable questions. If God favored the Christians, why did he allow this massacre? If Christian knights were the finest warriors on earth, why were they so easily beaten? If the crusading spirit was pure and holy, why did it lead to such disaster? There were no good answers. The old certainties were crumbling. The military lessons of Nicopolis were clear to those willing to see them. The age of the mounted knight as the supreme weapon of war was ending. The French charge at Nicopolis had been everything medieval warfare celebrated. It had been brave, glorious, and utterly ineffective. The combination of stakes, disciplined infantry, and firearms had stopped it cold. The future of warfare would belong to armies that could coordinate different types of troops, not to individual warriors seeking personal glory. But acknowledging that reality meant abandoning the entire social structure of medieval Europe. The knight was not just a military unit. He was the foundation of the feudal system. His status, his wealth, and his power all derived from his role as a warrior. If knights were obsolete, then the entire aristocracy was obsolete. Nobody wanted to face that conclusion. So instead, the disaster at Nicopolis was blamed on specific failures rather than systemic problems. It was the French arrogance that caused the defeat. It was the Hungarian betrayal that doomed the army. It was bad luck. It was anything except the unavoidable truth that the Ottoman military system was simply superior. This denial would cost European armies dearly in the coming decades. The Ottomans, meanwhile, learned the opposite lesson. They learned that European armies, for all their reputation, were beatable. The key was patience and discipline. Let the knights charge. Absorb the charge with prepared defenses. counterattack when the enemy is exhausted and disorganized. It was a formula that would work again and again. Over the next century, the Ottomans would use variations of this strategy to conquer Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, and eventually Constantinople itself. The walls of the great city, which had held for 1,000 years, would fall in 1453. The Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, would disappear, and at every step of the way, European armies would try to stop them and fail. There would be moments of resistance. Heroes like John Hunyadi and Skanderbeg would win battles and slow the advance. But the overall trajectory was clear. The Ottomans were expanding and Europe was retreating. The psychological blow of Nicopolis had lasting effects. It created a sense of fatalism. If the greatest crusade in 200 years could be annihilated so completely, what hope did smaller efforts have? This fatalism affected European politics for generations. Kings became reluctant to commit their armies to eastern campaigns. The cost was too high, and the chance of success too low. Instead, they focused on fighting each other. The 100 Years' War between England and France continued. The Italian city-states fought their endless rivalries. The Holy Roman Empire fragmented into squabbling principalities. While Europe turned inward, the Ottomans built an empire. For the families of the men who died at Nicopolis, the grief was personal and permanent. Entire noble lineages were wiped out in a single day. Estates passed to distant cousins or reverted to the crown. Villages lost their lords. Wives became widows. Children became orphans. The human cost of the disaster rippled through European society for decades. The financial cost was equally devastating. The ransoms demanded for the surviving nobles were astronomical. The Duke of Burgundy, in paying for his son's release, essentially bankrupted his treasury. He had to impose new taxes, sell properties, and cut back on court expenses. The economic drain weakened Burgundy at a crucial moment, just as it was trying to assert itself as a major power between France and the Holy Roman Empire. In France, the loss of so many experienced knights created a vacuum in military leadership. When the 100 Years' War resumed in the early 1400s, France struggled to field competent commanders. The disaster at Agincourt in 1415, where English longbowmen slaughtered French knights in another lopsided battle, had echoes of Nicopolis. The French had not learned the lesson. They charged anyway. They died anyway. The Battle of Nicopolis also had an impact on the crusading ideal itself. After 1396, crusades stopped being mass popular movements. There would still be military campaigns against the Ottomans, but they would be framed as defensive wars to protect Christendom, not as holy missions to reclaim lost territory. The romance was gone. The crusading movement had been revealed as what it always was: expensive, dangerous, and often counterproductive. Religious thinkers and theologians struggled to make sense of the defeat. Some claimed it was divine punishment for the sins of the Crusaders. Others argued that God was testing Christian faith. A few brave souls suggested that maybe God did not automatically favor Christians over Muslims, that victory in battle depended on tactics and preparation, not prayers and piety. This last view was considered dangerously close to heresy. The artists and writers of the period processed the trauma through their work. Chroniclers like Jean Froissart wrote detailed accounts of the campaign, trying to make sense of the disaster. Their writings are filled with descriptions of the bravery of individual knights, but also with a tone of bewilderment. How could such brave men fail so completely? The answer, that bravery is not enough, was too painful to state directly. In the decades after Nicopolis, a new genre of literature emerged: the Crusade Lament. These were poems and songs that mourned the failure of the Crusades and the triumph of the infidel. They were melancholy, fatalistic works that reflected a society coming to terms with a new reality. The world they had believed in, where Christian knights were invincible and crusades always succeeded, did not exist. It never had. For Sultan Bayezid, the victory at Nicopolis was the high point of his reign. He was at the peak of his power. He had crushed the Crusaders. He had consolidated his control over the Balkans. He was preparing to attack Constantinople itself. The Byzantine Empire was on its knees. Hungary was demoralized. Nothing seemed able to stop the Ottoman advance. But, as mentioned earlier, Bayezid's triumph was short-lived. In 1402, Tamerlane, the Turco-Mongol conqueror who had built an empire stretching from India to the Mediterranean, turned his attention to Anatolia. He considered Bayezid a rival and a threat. The two armies met at the Battle of Ankara. The battle was catastrophic for the Ottomans. Bayezid's army, which had seemed invincible at Nicopolis, was torn apart by Tamerlane's Mongol cavalry. Bayezid himself was captured. He spent the last months of his life as Tamerlane's prisoner, reportedly kept in a cage and paraded around as a trophy. He died in captivity in 1403, a humiliating end for the man who had humiliated Europe. Tamerlane's invasion threw the Ottoman Empire into chaos. Bayezid's sons fought a civil war for control. The expansion into Europe halted. For a brief moment, it seemed like the Ottoman threat might collapse entirely. European observers allowed themselves to hope. Perhaps Nicopolis would be avenged after all. Perhaps God had punished Bayezid for his cruelty. But the Ottomans recovered. Under Sultan Mehmed I and his son, Murad II, the empire stabilized and resumed its expansion. The civil war ended. The Balkans were reconquered. By the 1420s, the Ottomans were stronger than ever. The dream of a Turkish collapse faded. The nightmare of Ottoman expansion resumed. The survivors of Nicopolis watched this recovery with despair. They had seen the Ottoman war machine up close. They knew how dangerous it was. They had tried to warn Europe, but nobody listened. The lessons of Nicopolis were ignored or forgotten. Armies continued to rely on heavy cavalry charges. Commanders continued to let pride override tactics. The pattern would repeat itself for another century, until European armies finally adapted to the new realities of warfare. In Hungary, King Sigismund spent the rest of his life preparing for the next Ottoman invasion. He built fortresses along the southern border. He hired mercenaries. He tried to modernize his army. He also became King of Bohemia and eventually Holy Roman Emperor, using his increased resources to strengthen Central Europe's defenses. But he never forgot the disaster at Nicopolis. It haunted him until his death in 1437. The Crusader camp at Nicopolis was eventually reclaimed by the Ottomans and rebuilt. The fortress that the Crusaders had besieged became an Ottoman stronghold. The battlefield where 20,000 Christians died was left unmarked. There were no monuments, no memorials. The dead were buried in mass graves or left to the elements. Within a generation, the physical evidence of the battle had faded, but the memory remained. In the collective consciousness of Europe, Nicopolis became a symbol. It symbolized the end of an age. It symbolized the futility of crusading. It symbolized the rise of a new power that could not be defeated by faith and courage alone. It was a warning that the world was changing, and those who refused to change with it would be destroyed. The Battle of Nicopolis stands as one of the most complete military disasters in European history. The casualty ratio was horrific. The strategic consequences were lasting. The psychological impact was devastating. It was not just a lost battle. It was a lost world. The world where Christian knights were invincible died on that field in 1396. What replaced it was a more complex, more dangerous, and ultimately more modern world, where technology, discipline, and tactics mattered more than nobility and faith. For the men who died there, the 20,000 who never came home, Nicopolis was the end of everything. They died believing they were on a holy mission. They died believing that God would protect them. They died believing that their courage and their armor would be enough. They were wrong about all of it, but they died anyway, far from home, on a field they had never heard of, killed by an enemy they had underestimated. Their story is a reminder that war is not about glory or honor. It is about decisions. It is about who prepares better, who thinks clearer, and who adapts faster. The French knights at Nicopolis were the bravest men in Europe. They were also the most arrogant. Their bravery could not save them from their arrogance. On September 25th, 1396, arrogance lost to discipline, courage lost to tactics, and 25,000 men learned the hardest lesson in warfare. The only way to guarantee survival is to be smarter than your enemy. Everything else is just decoration.